Hello and welcome to the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We are so excited here today with video, which is a brand new feature for you baseball listeners. I'm Tom Brumbaugh, and this is Cody Holla. Cody, how's it going?
Dude, I'm so excited to do this again. Finally. How long has it been? A year and a half since we've done one?
Yeah, it was the last episode we did was the random COVID episode in January.
So a little bit of baseball, but not like actually just baseball.
Mostly fever dream.
Yeah. That was so much fun. We broke so many promises though about our continuous weekly baseball podcast, which we will make up for. We will deliver this week, especially with a bunch of guests, a lot of, different analysis, and I'm so ready for baseball.
You said that we're going to deliver this week, but we're not going to deliver.
Oh, no, not this week with a guest. I meant this year. We're already not delivering. Wheels are off.
Yeah, I look forward to it, too. I really do think that, in spite of Derek's claims that we're not going to do a podcast, I fully believe that we're going to take that spite, we're going to roll it up, and we're going to smoke it, and we're going to do a podcast every week.
Yeah, I'm already high.
Yeah, so some improvements to the podcast that we're thinking for this year. First off, we're doing video, which is something we experimented with our football podcast, and it was a lot of fun. And it's really simple for us to do, so why not add it? Second, we are going to try to add guests every week, to Cody's point. And I think that'll add some interactivity with the podcast, since it's kind of a crappy podcast if you don't understand the context of the league.
A little bit.
So yeah, any other thoughts about our podcast before we get rolling?
Dude, watch out for the sounds, too. Tom's working on soundboards and stuff. We're going to have, your bloop and stuff like that. And, and if you have a cool sound, send them. We'll include them. Give us your sounds.
That's true. We are looking for any sound submissions. It might have to go through a rigorous editing process, but we'd be happy to accept them. So with that being said, we want to jump immediately into the meat of the podcast, which is going to be starting off with the introduction, which is really just that we want to do a recap of the owners meeting, and I'm going to toss it over to our esteemed commissioner, Cody Holla, for that meeting recap.
Oh, very kind of you. Yeah, guys. So first off, thanks to everybody who joined. I really appreciated kind of everybody actually being able to get together. I know it wasn't over, in person, but it still was nice either way to go over the couple little topics that we had. For the people that weren't there, I'm going to keep it really, brief. And if you have more questions, just ask me. I don't need to rehash the whole thing. But, to summarize it, we came up with an Empire rule. And what an Empire rule is just if you win multiple times in a row, we're just trying to punish that team to make sure that, or rather bring them more back down to a competitive balance level, kind of like what we do with the compensation draft, but just a little bit more so as, more players could be taken out. So again, if you weren't at the meeting, just let me know and could address it from there. The second thing is I will be sending out a Venmo request for about $10 per player. And we're just going to use that money to pay for Premium League. With Premium League, we're able to get the wins or quality starts stat line, and we're also to get the taxi squad for the minor leaguers. If we ever want to explore into other areas too, they have a lot of alternatives. They have great systems for contracts if that ever comes up. They have just a lot of work that they do. Say we want different statistical categories that we want to use for scoring. They have that. They just have a lot of features, and I think they're a lot more willing to work with you if you're a Plus member. And for $10 a year, it's an easy fee to use for this platform. So if for some reason that's an issue with you, for anybody that didn't show up or did show up and you didn't want to speak up, please just let me know, and we can have a discussion around it.
Yeah, it is kind of worth noting that to this day, I haven't found a better platform for our needs than Fantrax. So,
yeah, there isn't one. I've looked everywhere. I tried to go to well, obviously the first two are Yahoo and ESPN, and those just don't really work that well. We already did the ESPN experiment, especially with them. They're good for redraft, awful for Dynasty.
if you're a fantasy boob, you go to ESPN and Yahoo.
Right.
If you're a fantasy noob, you go to Fantrax.
Yeah, is that one better?
It had to rhyme. I don't know.
If you're a fantasy dude, you go to Fantrax.
That's even better. There we go. If you're a fantasy dude, you play in the Major League Baseball.
Oh, smart.
Cool. Any other updates, Coates?
That's kind of all we got on the owner side. I will be probably, if you haven't checked, you can check the Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets, I think. You can check that to find out where your draft position is. I do have Fantrax already uploaded or updated for all your picks coming up in this year's draft. Planning on that tentatively is around mid-March to later March. We'll figure out what kind of works, given that the season doesn't start till April 2nd. We have plenty of time. We'll do the draft. I'll generally give people about a week to get their rosters in order, cut down to 32 players. Remember, your minor league taxi squad does not count towards your active players listing, so it's 32 plus 5 plus any DL players that you have, or IR, I should say. So, just pay attention for those. And for the people, if you're listening, that aren't on the Facebook page, please just make sure you check Fantrax. I'm also using the GroupMe page to talk about all of the league activity that we have going on. So I'm trying to find out what works best for everybody. But I do need cooperation. I can't really just text everybody every time. You got to still be a little bit alert, especially during the season here.
Yeah. We can talk about this after the podcast, but there might be a reason to maybe move to fully one platform maybe. But I guess it's difficult. Discord is not a great platform for posting documents and stuff.
GroupMe ideally would probably be the best one, but it's always not the best for posting on. You can write things up when you're online, but Facebook works really well. I know there was one specific member that was pretty not open to joining Facebook just for the group.
He also happens to be a top 15 prospect.
Yeah, well, he does. But I don't know. I don't mind posting it on Facebook and then posting it on Fantrax. The more I've looked into it, as long as everybody's paying attention.
Okay. Well, without further ado, I'm really excited to move into the trade recap segment. From this, we're not going to call it a full off season because it's really only been a month, and with COVID that complicates it a bit. But starting off right off the bat, on February 17th, that's only a week ago, so it's crazy how many trades. There have been 3 trades since February 17th.
Yeah.
But to the surprise of no one, Cody and Sam made a trade, taking their teams in 2 completely different directions. And Sam actually traded Yu Darvish, Trevor Bauer, and a 3rd round pick 5, which admittedly not very much, in return for Cody trading Sam C.J. Abrams, Nate Pearson, Joe Adell, and a 1st round draft pick and Christian Pache. I mean, those are so we're talking 4 either in majors prospects or current minor league prospects and a draft pick in arguably the strongest draft that we have upcoming, which we might touch on a bit later. So Cody, as being one of the members of 2 in this trade, walk me through your thought process of this trade.
Yeah, and for everybody just watching, I'm actually just sharing my screen. I'm going to show the graphic that we have right here. Yeah. This is just coming straight from the Google records that I keep. So you can see the trade up here that Tom just nicely laid out for you. We're looking at this first one. So you're asking what went through my mind when I did this trade?
Yes.
I wanted pitching. Pitching was the only area I really wasn't too competitive in, and I liked my batters. I had a ton of prospects, but I also felt like I I could have done one or two things. I could have just said this isn't going to be my year yet, and I could have waited probably another 2 years for some of these guys to start picking up or going there. But I didn't want to, and by all means, CJ Abrams, I think he's a great player. He's a top prospect. I already have the top. At the time, I had 3 top 12 shortstops, including Trey Turner and Fernando Tatis, the top 2. So I did not have room for him in my lineup, unless I wanted to put him utility. But at the time, I already had Javier Baez there.
Brag about it.
I know. I will. It's the only place I'm good at. and I just wanted pitching. I needed pitching to compete with Utah. And having DeGrom, having Bueller, having Kenta Maeda, having Hyun-Jin Ryu, Glasnow, I already had what I felt was a strong core of guys. But then this, to me, just made my pitching like just elite. Like Trevor Bauer and Yu Darvish are going to be top 10 guys this year, or are projected to be, rather. And to me, that's just adding so much value. The first round pick hurt a little bit, but when you get it, you kind of just got to go for it.
Yeah, and I'm going to cosplay as Sam, which is really difficult because he's a lot smarter than me. But if I'm Sam, we know from experience with Sam that he's very good at trading in a way that he knows what he wants and he picks directions. And in this case, he clearly picked the direction of wanting to be a team that's doing at least a mini rebuild. Maybe not a full rebuild, but trying to reallocate his resources age-wise. And by landing 4 prospects, one of which is already in the majors, which we affectionately coined the term in majors prospect, Joe Adell, I mean, he struggled mightily, and it's going to take a couple years for him to improve, but I think that is going to come. And so you're looking at him aging down significantly by getting rid of 2 older pitchers. Also, not to mention that pitching generally in a dynasty is not something you want to necessarily build around. So great move for both teams. I think this is a completely overall even trade. And that draft pick for Sam as well, round 1, pick 6, is significant in this draft class. I mean, this is where we've said this before outside the podcast, but round 1, pick 6 this year is going to be arguably a top 100 dynasty player, somewhere around there. So great move all around for both teams, and exciting. It seems like every year the first trade of the year is always the blockbuster.
Yeah, honestly, the fact that we've already made 3 trades this year has me so excited. I mean, I can look at the graphic here too. For I don't want to take last year into account. I'd rather take 2019. For 2019, we had a total of, 10 trades, and we already have 3 so far this year. And we're not even at the halfway point where a ton of other trades continuously happen. You can see, compared to the previous year, this is the earliest we've ever done for trades, and significant trades. Most of them were just pretty much a couple little March trades for not that much. I think in 2020 we had some, but that was more during draft time, which is crazy to think that we had this much during 2020 even, given the fact that we didn't even play that season. But it does kind of make sense too, though. Yeah, I love this trade, personally for me and for Sam. And the more and more I've looked, I truly do believe that with baseball, there is 2 set of rankings. There is the win in a 3-year window rankings, and then there's the rebuild rankings, which to me I think actually play a relevant part. And this is an article I saw a guy write on The Athletic, out of all places, and it's something I really like, because we always talk about, we always want to make everything so parallel and say, what's the dynasty value of the trade? What's the dynasty value? Is it fair in a dynasty value level? And at the same time, it's but what is a dynasty value level? Because having a great player that's not going to be good for 7 years might not align with your team, and then you don't actually get a good dynasty value from him. What does it mean? So to me, it's much more efficient to break it up into 3 places. And then when you can have one team going for the rebuild and one team going for the year 1 to 3 range, I think those are just very congruent and just work out really well when you're able to have those trades.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot more discrete points in between each of those, that makes even more sense. You could argue that, there's a trade coming up that has been made that isn't even the win in 3-year window, that is really a win now window. But I agree with you in principle. I think the more experienced you get in any Dynasty league, the more you realize that it isn't just as simple as those two viewpoints either.
Yep.
Because there are players in Dynasty that are so much more valuable too. Like, it's not even just about like the overall, the Dynasty perspective, because sometimes it's about like the present perspective, like in Dynasty, which I don't want to get into too much, but good points all around.
Yeah, and I mean, to piggyback kind of off what you just said, it is kind of the value curve on each player.
Right.
It's predicting where you think their value is going to hit their peak, and then where it's going to decrease, and being able to go around that. Like a player might be able to have like an overall better, longer peak era than another player, but if that time period isn't working with your time period that you're trying to establish yourself on, no matter what your time period is, then you need to improve that player. So I completely agree with you.
Let's go into trade number 2. So this was another really fun trade. In this case, Sam is also part of this, Mr. Trade McGee. And he gave away one player. He acquired one player, Jared Kelinic, who in a lot of people's regards is a top 5 prospect. Excellent hit tool, and he's part of a huge system in Seattle right now, prospect-wise. So that team is going to be the future Chicago White Sox, and so he's going to be in a fantastic environment. But Gronley acquiring 3 very win-now players in Marcus Semien, Charlie Morton, and in this case, receiving that round 1 pick 6 draft pick that Sam had just acquired. So what do you think might have gone through the minds of these players in this trade?
Well, especially going off the trade that Sam just did with me, it makes perfect sense why he did it. Like, to get Jared Kelinic out of this, the number 2 overall prospect, pair him up with Joe Adell in the outfield, where a place where he still has Mookie Betts, he still has Mike Trout. And I know he's trying to flip Mike Trout, and I actually think that's smart. And, teams that want to get a little bit further in the playoffs or try to make a run against me should look into that, especially to give up prospects for that. I think it's a great pick. I love him at number 2 as my prospect. That's where I have him, and I think he's got the hit tool. He has power. He has a balanced approach. He's got a smooth swing. He hits for average. He can have a little bit of stolen bases here and there, but not, he's not like known for it exclusively. But he's just a 5-tool player, and I think for Sam to get him, that's a great deal. Moving over to the Gronley side, I think what probably goes through his mind a little bit is trying to do a patch-up job when you think you're like, okay. And it's tough for Gronley because Gronley, unfortunately, hasn't really competed yet. And I think maybe he's like, well, maybe now is my time. Maybe I need to try a different method of what I'm doing. What I don't really like about it from Gronley's side, and I'm always going to speak truthfully on this podcast. That's all I do. I spit truth. Is I don't like the fact that he gets 2 older players and then gets the preseason first-round pick. Because even if you pick up a free agent that could be considered a win-now mode, most of the free agents that we've looked at are generally young guys. They're not like arguably that old, like for your main guys, the big ones that you see. You could argue starting pitching maybe a little bit, but I think it just doesn't really line up with what he's going for necessarily. It does a little bit, but I think Charlie Morton's on his last stand. In fact, I've seen rumors, a ton of them. This is why I didn't want to trade for him. I've seen rumors that this will be his last year when he went back to Atlanta.
Yeah, while I agree with most of what you're saying, I don't think that the round 1 pick 6 is. I think round 1 pick 6 this year is actually the year that you can pick up a real contender for this year. There are several starting pitchers, and there are at least 2 outfielders I can think of that are like at least close enough to the point on their curve where they're like competitive or they're like close to their prime. Sure. And then there are some sneaky good relievers for our saves and hold league to consider. Like there are a lot of those.
Yeah.
So and I think that any one of those 3 that I just listed is certainly going to be available at 106. So if we talk about like value congruency and window congruency, this trade hits that mark of being the type of trade that if you are trying to compete now, this trade on Gronley's ends make a lot of sense. Whether or not we agree on whether he is competing is the question, which I think is probably a separate topic.
Yeah, no, it is.
But I think so. I guess I'll assess. I think that this is an even from like a dynasty market value, whatever the frick that means, because that's kind of a nebulous concept. I think this is even. That being said,
yeah,
I know that you're really biased towards Jared Kelinic.
I really like Jared Kelinic. I'm very high on him. So, and I've been very high on top 5 prospects because I always think that they're super undervalued, especially on certain rankings that I look at. And I just buy into it. And I just have serious questions about Charlie Morton. I have serious questions about Marcus Semien. And at 2021, to me, yes, if you look at, I agree with you. Based on value, it's close. If it's not even, it's at least really.
Like if you were making this trade, if a top 4 team made this trade, I don't think you would disagree with the evaluation.
No, I would think if you're a top 4 team, you could still get more for that. That's my opinion. I think for a market value perspective of what he could have gotten, I think Gronley could have gotten more for that. Or gotten better players. I get that he tried to diversify it a little bit. The fear that I have is when that first round pick comes around is that there will be good free agents taken off the board already. I get that there'll be some left, but to me, a reliever isn't enough at that. To me, this is, especially with reliever inconsistency, I don't know if I trust relievers in the first round, especially given all the talent that is there, especially given prospect talent that is there. And to me, I see Gronley maybe getting a prospect at that position that could fall to him. And if that happens, you're kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum to me a little bit, and it doesn't really make sense from a team perspective why you would do that. I'm saying from a value perspective, I get where it's within the realm of it. I'm saying as a top 4 competing team, if I had Jared Kelinic, I would not do that trade.
Okay. I agree with you, but I still think it is not if even if we had a veto, well, I guess we do have a veto. I would not veto this.
Oh
trade.
no, I would never veto. No, this is not by any means. This is not egregious.
It's not even a bad trade.
No,
it's not. It's not a vetoable.
No,
it's not a bad trade.
Nope.
It's just I think there might be maybe a slightly clear winner.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what it is. I think it's just like, would I take one side? Yes, but do I think it's like just like the other person just screwed over the other person? No, not at all. Not by any means at all.
Right.
So that's just my opinion.
Well, then let's talk about the last trade that hasn't even actually been official yet, because it was just fresh last night, and of course it involves either you or Sam.
Of course.
Trade aficionados, in this case involving you. You traded away some big pieces. You traded away Javi Baez, who you famously acquired in 2018, I believe. Very early. It might have been the first trade that was made in this league.
It was. I have it right here. It was the first ever trade. Thanks, Tom.
Holy shit. Talk about when I knew nothing about Dynasty. I've grown in 3 years. I can't believe I've been playing for almost 3 years now. So you famously acquired Javi Baez for the low price of Ian Desmond at the time. And so, anyway, you now traded him after owning him for almost 3 years. And you traded Gavin Lux, and you traded Griffin Canning. But in return, you're receiving Nolan Arenado and Nelson Cruz. So don't talk about what you think. What do you think? What do you think Matt might have been thinking on this one?
So the biggest issue that I looked at when we did this, that I saw, was Matt needed a shortstop. Matt had no available shortstop. His top one was Andrelton Simmons. Like, he doesn't do anything.
Right.
Like, defensively, he's a god, but, as far as an actual baseball player, he's good, but not a fantasy baseball player.
Yeah, he might show up on the MLB's top 100 players at the end of the year.
Right.
But he might end up on the top 100 free agents at the end of our fantasy year.
Right, actually. Like, he doesn't put up stats.
Right.
He was like, he hits for average, but he doesn't get a lot of RBIs. He doesn't get a lot of home runs, gets occasional stolen bases. And I think for Matt's team, when I was just reviewing it, I think it came down to the fact that Javier Baez filled a position he needed now. Gavin Lux provides him just a huge second base prospect, to the point that second basemen are really hard to, especially good ones, are very hard to own right now. And I know he has an elite one in Ozzy Albies. I know because he took it from me. But I get where he likes Gavin Lux a lot. I think Gavin Lux is going to have a lot of position flexibility too, depending on where he plays. He was like the number 2, number 3 prospect coming up, and he's kind of had a middling thing. I think Gavin Lux is a little bit too much to just turn down, especially for Matt when you're looking at his team. And he's a good prospect, and this is kind of how I always felt about him. And I think, to me, when I traded him away, looking at him, there was a lot of questions about him this year too. I actually am. The only thing I will say that I'm worried about him with is him getting the Brendan Rodgers treatment, where he's behind players for too long, like how Brendan Rodgers was in Colorado. They don't give him enough solid, consistent playing time for him to develop, and then you kind of he gets lost in the shuffle. And then maybe he'll be good eventually, but you just don't know, because that can really ruin a guy's basically his confidence. So Gavin Lux is not without question marks for sure. And then I think Griffin Canning adds another young pitcher to his team. I mean, Shane Bieber, who is kind of the focal point right there on his team right now, he's going to be there a long time. I think he's actually, as long as pitchers can be good, I think Shane Bieber will be good.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would argue I would say Shane Bieber is the most valuable dynasty pitcher in fantasy baseball.
I agree. I actually, yeah, I think it goes him. I know a lot of people still put DeGrom up there, but due to age differences, I do not.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're talking. I mean, Bieber is
almost 10 years, or not 10 years, but it's like 8 years, right?
Yeah, DeGrom's coming up on 32.
Yeah,
Bieber's
DeGrom's
25.
Yep.
I mean, and I think Bieber is the type of pitcher where he because of his not overly whipping the ball, throwing motion, he's going to have a decently long longevity as well.
I think so too.
So,
I love Shane Bieber. Don't get me wrong.
But this trade isn't about Shane Bieber.
Yeah, it's not. It's about Griffin Canning, and I think Griffin Canning adds another development pitcher to his squad that he can use to maybe. He was kind of a throw-in, honestly, to a certain extent, but he still is an asset nonetheless.
Yep. So I'm gonna take your position, I guess.
Sure.
But then give my overall thoughts as well. I obviously you're just in the vein of you're gonna try to trade young so that you can get equivalent value in an older position, and you did that by acquiring a utility only Nelson Cruz for fantasy, which is interesting to consider because the utility position actually the utility position value actually is kind of going down because of what might be happening with the NLDH. Mm-hmm. But that being said as well, you're acquiring Nolan Arenado, who, in my opinion, was formerly regarded for years for all the years that we've played fantasy baseball, he was regarded as a top 10 dynasty asset. There are two major factors that have detracted from his value. Factor number one is his shoulder injuries that are now recurring. It's happened twice now, and that's a major concern for any player. We've seen huge, highly valued players like Chris Bryant go through similar issues where it's just a recurring nagging injury. And playing time, the more you play fantasy baseball, you realize how important playing time is, because if you're not accruing stats, then they're just taking up value on your team. Mm-hmm. The second thing that happened to him is when he went to St. Louis, which is a weaker stadium, not too much of a weaker lineup, in my opinion. In fact, some people would consider it an upgraded lineup.
Yeah.
So environment. Overall, this checks all the boxes to me for a trade that I would love to make if I'm on Matt's end. And I love that Matt made this trade in his second year of our league. Third year, I guess. I don't know how to look at that. And because it checks the box of present value, so he doesn't really lose that much present value. I think he does, but he still gets a player that's in majors prospect in Gavin Lux, and he still gets Javi Baez. And then to me, Griffin Canning is a throw-in. But that's value still. Mm-hmm. I mean, he could definitely still turn out. And Griffin Canning, when he came onto the scene a couple years ago, was pretty interesting. So I love the trade for Matt. I think he wins the trade, but that doesn't mean that you don't win the trade for now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and we know where we stand. We had a huge discussion about this differently because we disagree on the disparity or essentially the delta between Arenado and Javi Baez. I think it's larger. You think it's a little bit smaller, and that's totally fine. That's all. To me, when you can have members of a team disagree on that, like the delta, that's kind of what makes trades good. That's the whole point of trades, right? It's one player believes this player is going to be better than the other one. The other side believes this one, but they're close enough to where either side could be correct.
Sure. Yeah, and that's where I like my viewpoint is just that I don't think Baez and Arenado are that far apart in present value. Really, I mean, just for this year even.
Yeah. And that's I definitely disagree with you. And as far as the nagging shoulder injuries, I think he only had injuries this last year. I don't think he's ever had injuries before that. Before that, he was like almost a constant 155 game.
No, I
player.
think it was in 2019 too.
Was it?
Yeah,
because he still was a top.
I forget the exact. I can Google it.
Yeah, why don't you do that? I don't want. I'm sharing my screen right now, so I don't want to.
I mean, I don't know if it's worth it, but
sure,
I will.
It might not,
anyway.
but just for the sake of argument,
injury for Arenado. Oh, I guess the first article is Arenado to IL for just second time in career. Yeah, it was an AC joint and bone bruise in his shoulder.
Yeah, this last year.
Yes.
Yep.
It's the same thing that happened to him before, I believe. But anyway.
Yeah. To me, though, interesting facts, too, that I actually want to... So normally we always talk about home run differentials between the Rocky Stadium and other stadiums.
Yeah.
I always find that really interesting. Do you know I actually looked up on MLB Savant his expected home run outcome based on being in the Cardinals Stadium versus Coors? He actually would have had more home runs in Busch Stadium. It's a fun little fact that not a lot of people know.
That is a fun fact.
Yeah, his expected home run outcome was about 2 home runs higher, which again isn't a ton, but for a 60-game season, that's actually quite a bit. And I think the fact that I actually love the lineup around him, I think he's going to be good. I just think, to me, he's coming in healthy. He feels good this year. He still is only 29. Like, he's not old. And the thing that I get
He's 30.
Is he 30 now? Okay.
He's like 29.9.
Sure. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. And then Javi Baez is maybe like a year or two younger. Javi Baez, to me, didn't have an injury last year. Didn't have anything. And he's always had a super high K rate and whiff rate that people have always been questioning. When is he going to come back?
Yeah, he just swings hard. And then...
Yeah. But I mean, like, and then this last year was a common example of if you miss your timing by a little bit, especially when you do that, you drop off the face of the earth. Whereas Nolan Arenado is, even last year, was one of the best percentiles in whiff rate. Like, he's in the 99th percentile as far as his whiff rate. So to me, it just said, I agree with you. If he's healthy, to me, he is an elite hitter. He has the power. He doesn't strike out. He still hits. Versus Javi Baez, where he might not even be injured and he still might decrease. So that's my gamble that I'm taking, and I'm willing to accept that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I think it's just a fun discussion topic.
Yeah, I agree.
More than anything else, because I think we have just different placements of him, and I think that's totally fine.
I'm going to interject here to Tony Reale myself in a positive way, because affirming, I guess, a little bit. But so I guess in summary, it was the shoulder injury, and the MRI showed it was revealed inflammation in his AC joint and a bone bruise in the shoulder, like I said before. In 2018, it was also a shoulder injury, the same shoulder. So it's different injuries, but the same shoulder. So again, I'm not trying to say that Chris Bryant and him are the same player.
Sure.
But Chris Bryant has fallen off hard. So we could be seeing the beginning of that with Arenado. So I think that like my ranking of him is still as like a top 50 dynasty player, but his box and whisker plot is big. I don't think it's as big as Baez's.
Yeah, I think Baez has a lot more risk associated, and he already had worse stats last year while he was healthy. That's my concern. Is I already knew Arenado was hurt last year, and he didn't have good stats. And before that, he was almost a consensus top 5 player.
I agree.
Baez has not been there yet. I think the payoff is so much higher for Arenado that even on their actual rankings it raised, that's why he is higher than everybody's rankings. And we disagree about this, but I think there is a significant difference between a guy that's 38, number 11 shortstop, versus a guy that's top 5 third baseman and a guy that's number 25 overall, especially in dynasty rankings. Like, I think that is significant enough to the fact that, to me, it warrants some of the value away at Gavin Lux in this trade. Essentially, I think this was a very even trade. I think it all depends on your valuation of Gavin Lux. Gavin Lux is literally the ultimate, was this trade worth it or not?
Of course.
Because I think that's the easiest way. Because Nelson Cruz, I love him, and I think he's going to do great things for my team this year. But like I told you, I think he's going to be, as far as a relevant fantasy player, I think this is kind of his last year.
Yeah, I think he already showed his signs of decline that he hasn't necessarily already shown. Like, I'm looking at compared to last year, over 60 games, his exit velocity was the lowest it's ever been at 91.6 miles an hour, and two full miles an hour down from 2019. And then his whiff percentage is also a career high, so 34.2%.
Yep.
So again, I'm just saying, like, I think that is, since he's showing the decline, which he had never really shown it before, I think this is probably like his last year of being like great.
I agree. I fully agree. I think he'll have a good year this year, and then I think actually age. Like I said, do I think he's going to be a 40 home run hitter and a 100 RBI guy? No, I don't think he's going to be that like he was a couple of years ago. Do I think he has a potential still be a 30 home run hitter with maybe 85 RBIs, 90? Yeah, I definitely do, especially on that team with the opportunities he's given.
Yeah.
And to me, that is a worthwhile position to have in a year that I'm going to be competing. Now,
but is he a Hall of Famer?
He's not even over 500 career homers, is he?
No, he's like 400.
I don't think he is. I think he unfortunately blossomed too late in his career because he didn't actually start becoming a home run threat until like his 30s.
Yeah.
I think if he had done this through his 20s, he would have been, because I think if he had done this through his 20s, he would have been like up around 600 home runs at least, if not a little. If he may have even cracked 700, in my opinion. Like if he actually hit like the 30 home runs a year type stuff that he's been doing, but unfortunately he won't be. If I might be mistaken, but if I don't think Edgar Martinez is a Hall of Famer.
No,
and
I don't think he is
they're
either.
very similar players.
Edwin Encarnacion.
I don't think Edwin will be. Well,
no, I'm not saying he will be.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that like similar late bloomers.
Yeah. It's just unfortunately they're just a little bit too late, and I think they're trying to be a little bit. There's a lot of good players. That's what I would say too. Is there's a lot of good home run hitting players, especially now. Speaking of which, sorry, not to sidetrack this. Did you hear the report that they're trying to cause more of a dead ball? In the baseballs this year?
I did see that.
I'm interested to see how that plays out.
I think it was projected early on to like affect by like 5% or something. 5% lower home runs.
I would like that.
Yeah.
Me and Sam had an interesting conversation. Since we're already kind of covered these trades, I kind of want to just like have a little open discussion with you. Do you think baseball is better when there's a lot of home runs, or do you think baseball is better when there's smaller home runs but more deserving?
I mean, I think that analytics have proven that the game is less fun when there's more home runs because typically, I mean, I guess there isn't a direct correlation, but we've talked about this before on the podcast that in recent years, the elevated home runs and strikeout rate has made the game even less about the spectrum of the game and more about just trying to go towards those two outcomes, one of those two outcomes. So the fewer home runs there are, in my opinion, is a very good thing because it provides more outcomes that are less solvable by analytics. Mm-hmm. And the more difficult the game is to solve by analytics, the better it is from a game health perspective.
I 100% agree. I want 30 home runs to mean something again.
Yep.
Do you remember, like, back in the thousands, like right immediately after the steroid era, back when like hitting 30 home runs meant something to a player?
Yep.
And it was like, wow, that's a feat. And it's like if you had 30 home runs, you had like 120 RBIs because that wasn't all you did. You had to be an incredible hitter. And I don't know. I do miss that side of the game.
Yeah, I think it also just it creates more situations where the game isn't defined by just, okay, you need a home run here. I think that when the home run ball, and maybe this is stupid, I'm sure someone like Derek would point out like, well, that's not true at all because I'm smart. But I feel like when there are fewer home runs, there are more situations where like small ball is introduced and stealing bases.
I think this is the argument against like people that complain about the shift. this is how you fix it.
Yeah.
You literally need to cause more of a dead ball and cause players to think about where they're hitting the ball a lot more. And I mean, like, the other thing I want to bring up is if they cause a dead ball more, do you think pitchers' fastball velocities will be affected? Because in theory, if you can't hit it as far, you can't theoretically throw it as fast either.
True.
I think it'd be interesting to see if that has like a multiple effect right this year. I don't think.
Wait a minute. I said true, but from a physics perspective, I don't think it matters too much because I think the physics at play with the ball being juiced is that the ball hitting the bat, it's a coefficient of like restitution, whatever. It's like it's fuck. If I could put a comment over this right now.
It's less about the spin and more about the actual hit.
It's more
rate
about
the
the
stretch.
hit. It's like the trampoline effect.
Yep, exactly.
So when you juice the ball, it's like the difference between throwing a rubber ball versus a brick.
Sure.
Whereas I don't think throwing a brick that's the same way as a rubber ball influences how you like where it goes, as long as the aerodynamics are the same. In other words, throwing a baseball is more about the aerodynamics and the spin. Hitting a baseball is more about the trampoline effect.
I can get behind that for sure.
So I don't know. I would say no.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what they mean by deadening the ball, whether it's internal material or whether it's outside material, because I think outside material could possibly lead to more drag. And that's the only issue that I would have, even with pitchers, is like, yeah, you can have a rotation, but if there's more drag, it will slow you down, which I don't think it's supposed to be outside.
It's always been about the core.
Yeah.
It's always been about the windings. I believe it's always been about how tightly wound the ball is. Yeah. And that's why the trampoline effect matters. Well, from an aerodynamics drag perspective, it doesn't matter for the throwing the ball.
I think they're just also realizing that in general, in order to keep the game healthy and actually keep pitchers interesting, because the best we love watching pitchers. They just get injured way too much, though. And, like, by effectively leveling hitters to not hit these bombs or home runs or anything, I think there's an argument to be made that it's going to turn more, I hope the league turns more to this, is the Shane Bieber, the Zach Gallen of you can throw 94. It is always about how much you change speeds, which is actually what I do think it is.
Bring up Zach Gallen and Bieber, but you forget my boy Zach Greinke. That's what he's all about.
God, yeah, that guy's...
He throws like 86 miles an hour.
I know. Yeah, but...
he throws a changeup.
Throws a lollipop.
But he's still one of the best pitchers in the league.
He is really good. But yeah, I mean, but even for guys that don't, he almost adapted to that because he had to. I'm talking about guys that are going to make a career out of it because they need to, because they just don't have that velocity. And like, I love the fact that those guys are elite based on control and based on movement. And I don't know, even Kenta Maeda. Kenta Maeda is a perfect example. Comes over to Minnesota. They say, don't throw your fastball. Throw your slider. Throw your slider every single pitch.
Right.
Pretty much. And he has great results. And it's like these batters don't know how to adjust to off-speed pitches because they're going for the home run ball. They're going for whatever's easiest. And a fastball down the middle is easiest to hit.
There's definitely been, on that note, there's definitely been a trend in analytics towards fastball is actually being a lot of times the worst pitch. Yep. Like statistically, on average, this is not the case. By any means, this is not the case for every pitcher.
Yep.
But on average, in repertoires, the fastball is the worst pitch in someone's arsenal. There are pitchers like Garrett Cole that comes to mind where his fastball is, and Jacob deGrom, where their fastball is like their best pitch in their arsenal.
That's because it has so much movement.
Yeah, exactly.
Which it is just a movement game. And it like the perfect example to bring this up with that I always go back to is Tyler Glasnow. The man can throw 98, 99. But if batters are able to sit on it, they will hit it.
Right.
But he's got one of the most devastating curveballs I've ever seen to go with it. And then he has a changeup to go with it, and which causes hitters to have to double think about what they're doing, what they're timing for. And it makes that pitch that is high in velocity that much faster because they're like, oh, is it going to be a curveball? Anytime you got to take time to identify the pitch, you're going to be screwed. And I don't know. He's one of those pitchers that, to me, unfortunately, has to do like a 50-50 mix. But guys like Kenta Maeda, guys like... I always just go back to what the Twins were doing. But if you actually go to like MLB Savant and you look at batting average against those pitches, it's like not even close. It's like most curveballs, especially if we looked at like league average, I think they're under 200 batting averages against those pitches. Most of those pitches. Which... Sure, you can say, well, it depends on their usage. Because if they're using them under 30% or so, then it's like, okay, yeah, they're just obscure pitches that batters can't hit. But it's like even pitchers that are elite pitchers that use them over 30%, they're still getting really low batting averages, like
Right.
low 200s. And it's
I
like,
agree.
man, I think that's a way to go. I mean, like these batters just don't. I don't know. They adjust, but maybe they will this year. I don't know.
Well, that's why. I mean, you're bringing up the point why to me watching pitching, I mean, I don't even. I rarely even account for like what a batter is doing when I'm watching a baseball game. To me, the art of pitching is so incredible, and the art of pitching is what makes baseball, and that's what you're kind of discussing. Is like, it's not just about like the pitch in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
All pitches are based on the other pitches,
Yep.
and it's why like some of the highest prospects of late in the pitching world have been like 4 or 5 pitch pitchers, because I feel, I mean, we're very, very novice scouts, but I feel that part of that is because there's 2 reasons. One, they all influence each other positively, but 2, if that pitcher loses one of those pitches, which is very common, they still have 3 solid pitches.
Yeah.
So that's typically what happens in evaluation process. But
Yeah, I think it's been what it's always been, I think, as far as pitch repertoire. But I think the biggest thing nowadays is being able to throw a pitch and effectively changing the speeds on said pitch, the same pitch.
Yeah.
It's, can you have a 92-mile-an-hour fastball, and then can you also have a 95?
yeah,
And like
like you, Darvish does that.
yes, and I
It's
don't
like
just
2
I don't
seam.
right. Well, I don't even just mean the difference between a 4-seamer and a 2-seamer.
Mm-hmm.
I actually mean like Trevor Bauer does this too, and he's super analytical. Is being able to just to identify, okay, I've thrown kind of really hard fastballs. Maybe I need to tone it down a little bit and keep the hitter guessing, because a hitter can see the same pitch, but their rhythm, their timing, that's all they are, is timing.
Right.
And if you can't time it because you're even moving your pitches, or if you have like a curveball and even you slow it down 2 miles an hour, like that's a huge difference to a hitter. But the hitter doesn't think so, and that's
Yeah.
what makes it so effective. You know better than anybody who's the best at this, who was honestly the pioneer of this, Justin Verlander.
Oh, I thought you were saying I was the pioneer.
No, I said you know who is.
Yes, I know that I'm the best football pitcher in the world.
Oh no, not you. No, I hit dingers.
Yes, Justin Verlander. Yeah, he was incredible.
He was the first one to do it, where he would only
Maybe not the first. We've only been watching for like 20 years.
the first one to do it super effectively. That was like actually noticeable
In our lifetime.
I actually sure. I think most analysts that I've seen only really talk about him doing it. About how he would literally start off the game throwing like 94, 93, and then if the game ever got stressful, he pushed
he'd
it up
ramp
to
it up.
96, 97.
99, yeah, 100.
Yeah, if he's not like fingering Kate Upton or something,
Oh,
then yeah.
dude, he would get it to like 101 at times. I'm telling you, man. I watched that guy all the time.
101.
Dude, there'd be times where the Tigers were bad, but I would tune in just for Justin Verlander.
Yeah, just him.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, something about him. Something about him in a shower. Yada yada. Nice.
Yes, I definitely wouldn't tune into what was that Reddit leak? What was that infamous Reddit leak of all the nudes?
I don't know what it's called, but I know we're talking about the fact that it showed his ass and Kate Upton's
Maybe
ass.
it wasn't Reddit. God, holy shit! 4chan, was it 4chan?
Oh sure.
Oh shit! I feel so.
I don't
oh
know
my God.
whose leak it was, but I know.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know the
fappening. That was
Yeah,
what
the
it's called.
fappening, of course, of course.
Pitch tunneling is also a big factor too in throwing pitches.
Mm.
That's starting to, what the pitch tunneling. The idea that an effective pitch mix is one where you can throw a pitch that does the same thing for 70% of its ball flight,
Yep.
and then at the last 30%, it might go this way or it
Yes.
might go this way.
Yes.
And that's what. Yeah, I think that's actually starting to be accounted for in like X stats. That's what I was just reading about. Like in 2021, they're gonna start being able to like account for like the actual ball flight of a pitch, which is just like fucking fascinating to me. Like,
I would love to be able. I don't know if they analyze it yet fully, but I would think you could have an assumption based on a catcher's mitt. I would love if they could do like a standard deviation about the target, about like where you're, or like I suppose they do more regional aspects because you can't do exact locations because that's just way too fucking specific. But like, just regions hit based on regions attempted. So like low outside strike zone. How often did the catcher line up there and the pitcher hit that area within a reasonable variation? Like obviously, if it's like low and outside, yeah, he hit it, but he hit it in the dirt. That doesn't count.
No, I agree.
But I would think that these MLB probably has so much more further analytics that the things we're talking about, I bet they have.
Like breath rate.
Yeah, like how fast are they breathing?
Right.
Oh,
Seems super valuable.
mounds per game, mound visits per game. Oh,
Before we run the risk of making this podcast longer than an hour.
Whoops.
Not your fault at all. This is a lovely conversation. But let's move to the draft preview, which is not going to be fully comprehensive whatsoever. But we plan on talking about just a few of the players that have jumped out to us that are available. And I'll start off by saying that one of the players that jumps out to me and hopefully everyone in our league, which is just a constant reminder that our draft is coming up. I don't know, have we set a date yet? A couple weeks from now, probably.
Sometime mid-March, late March.
Yeah, mid-March before the season's over. So please do some research. Please, for the love of God. This game is not fantasy football where you can just show up and look at arbitrary rankings. Fantasy baseball requires a lot of research to determine the best player. So please do that for your team, because it's not just about taking BPA, even though I'm famous for taking BPA. Fantasy baseball is really about taking so many different factors into account for your team. So,
for reference, BPA is best player available.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. BPA, not the plastic that's like illegal to be in any like plastic bottles and shit.
Yeah, fuck plastic.
All right, so the player that jumps out to me and most everyone, there are two, but I think the biggest name and that comes with the most excitement is Spencer Torkelson, first overall draft pick. For the Detroit Tigers, and projected to be a third baseman, although it's EL. God, you're such a noob. Do you even watch the Tigers?
It's not about him.
So, Spencer Torkelson, third base, even though he was a first baseman in college. Doesn't steal bases, but he does literally everything else. So, I would be very surprised if he isn't taken at least in the first two picks.
Yeah, I think we had this discussion before, and we don't need to rehash it. But by all accounts, it sounds like he will be going first overall to Sam, but things could change, and I think it's a solid pick. I mean, number one overall pick in the rookie draft, one of the best hitting prospects we've seen in 10 years, I would say. I was thinking, somebody said it was like the best hitting prospect they had seen since Alex Rodriguez, but I thought that they probably just forgot about Bryce Harper.
Yeah, and Mike Trout too.
Yeah, well, Mike Trout was high.
Yeah,
but Mike Trout wasn't. I mean, he wasn't though. I don't think he was 101 even.
He was behind pick. Harper.
No, he was. Oh, you're
talking about in the draft.
Yeah, as far as a first round draft pick, he was like the 20th pick. He wasn't even up top 10. He wasn't I'm speaking strictly of 101s, and to me, Torkelson's up there. He's Harper, he's A-Rod,
Guerrero.
Yeah. Oh, well, Guerrero Jr. wasn't 101 either, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, well, he wasn't drafted.
Yeah.
He started playing baseball in the minor leagues when he was 18.
Well, I think it was international draft he was selected or something, however that works. There's some way he does get selected. Okay. It's not I think players either get chosen from the international draft or the actual MLB draft.
We should know this.
We should.
How can we even have a podcast?
We shouldn't.
Cheers.
But yeah, anyways, I think he's going to be a great player. He's my number one off the board. I think Sam's getting just a solid player here, especially what he gave up for him. I think it's really going to work in his benefit. Yeah. Is there anything specifically, Tom, that you really like about him that you've looked at or you've seen so far?
Yeah, he plays for the Detroit Tigers.
Okay, anything that actually makes him be good.
Something that doesn't detract from his value.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, his power. I think he hit almost 60 home runs in less than 140 games in college with Arizona State.
Yeah.
Or Arizona State.
Yep.
So I mean, that just jumps out to me right away. It's always fun. Like, the dream of the potential of a power hitter as a prospect is rare. We don't see like those 40 home run hitter prospects very often. Oftentimes, like, if you look at the overall spread, like the histogram of the prospects, it's most of the time it's like the high on base percentage contact hitters that have some power and some speed. I feel more often than not.
Yep, for sure.
And so that's what jumps out to me immediately, is that he's like those one in every like 3-year prospects that's like, oh yeah, he hits 40 dingers, like Hernandez, like Guerrero. They don't come around that often, so that's what's most exciting to me.
Yeah, he's like Andrew Vaughn on steroids, I would say.
Yeah.
He's just a little bit better. What I really took away from him was his power to all fields. He isn't just a strict pull hitter, at least when I watched highlights of him. He was spraying the ball everywhere with wood bats nonetheless. Like, he can still hit it all. I think he's going to have a seamless adjustment. I think he'll be in the majors by debatably next year already.
Yeah, it won't be this year, which is kind of silly. I remember when he got drafted, there was a lot of people saying that he would be like one of the kind of players that might be able to play right away, which hasn't happened since like the early 2000s. But it seems like people are getting away from saying that.
I think with all the this is kind of what I always figured, service time. There's no way.
Yeah,
there's no way
sucks.
they do this. And I think the next player association meeting, they're gonna readdress.
Yeah, it
service
sounds
time,
like, especially with what's been
yeah.
happening with, with like Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah, well, them. I mean, even Kelinic talking about it, about his own GM, about how they make comments. I mean, it's so clear to everybody that everybody was just misusing prospects based on service time.
Yep.
And it's just like,
it's screwed up.
And it's like, how many prospects should be in the majors right now?
A lot.
Yeah. They're clearly better. It's like, how many of these old 38-year-olds do we have that were like, why are they being paid $5 million to play this game when there's so much better prospects?
Yep.
This was one thing I do respect about the NFL is, like, once you're old and bad, they get rid of you.
Yep.
They don't take any time. They don't give you any leeway. They're just like, you're gone. Like, either be good or get out.
Unless your name is Adrian Peterson.
Yeah. That's true. But, yeah.
Because he's bad, but he's on a team. That team
He is on a team. He is. He's not. Yeah. Well, to be fair, he was the best on the Lions.
Whoa. Don't fucking talk shit about my boy DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I love DeAndre Swift. If this was a baseball podcast or football podcast. But no. So anyways, in conclusion, I think he's very good.
So to ship to the next player that jumps out to me, on the other side of the spectrum, my favorite pitcher, who I do think undoubtedly will be drafted early on, is available. This maybe isn't your favorite pitcher, but is Corbin Burns. He had an electrifying, like just outstanding 2020 during COVID, and it kind of backed up his like semi-breakout at the end of 2019 when the Brewers were going for like a run at it a little bit. And I'm really excited to see what he could do, because he kind of like, I think one of the stats that I kind of like cherry picked was he ditched his four-seamer, which is like the worst in baseball, and then he like last year he was like 13K per nine last year. Like he went off during the COVID season.
That's nuts.
So that's like top 5.
Yeah.
So and in baseball, throwing strikeouts is a very repeatable stat. Like that is something that happens year over year over year. So once you prove yourself as a strikeout pitcher, it's pretty repeatable. I love Corbin Burns. He's my best pitcher off the board.
Yeah, I would have a tough time disagreeing with that. I really don't think there's a comparison. I think there's another player that I will cover later a little bit that I think is really close that I would take personally. The only thing that always alarms me a little bit about Brewers, and this is more getting into the organization, is I agree. I think this guy's going to be a strikeout pitcher for many years to come, and I think he's got a very low floor or high floor. He's got a high floor where he's going to be like, you know what you're going to get out of him. You're going to get your strikeouts. You're going to probably get pretty decent stats. It still, to me, is to be seen whether he'll be the Jeff Samardzija type strikeout pitcher or if he'll be like an electric elite starter. And honestly, from last year, I think he'll be more of that elite starter, which I think is totally justifiable. I remember when he came on the scene about 2 years ago, and he was a hot pickup commodity, and then he performed well that first year. K per 9 was a little bit down, but then next year he improved the K per 9, and then finally this last half season he put it all together. So I'm interested to see if he can keep it up. I'm not. I always try to be a little hesitant a little bit on some of these players. I mean, Freddie Peralta also had kind of this going for him in the same organization.
Yeah, it's true.
So I'm just trying to be carefully optimistic about him. But I do think he should be a high draft pick based on positions available right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, anytime you're
agree.
getting like, I think he's at least a top 30 pitcher going into next year.
Yep,
That's
I agree.
where I like at least. And
Yep.
anytime you're getting a top 30 pitcher, I mean, I always put it in the perspective of like there are 10 teams in our league. A top 30 pitcher is an SP3, SP4. So I'm just saying he's like basically at least an SP3.
Yep.
That's so valuable.
Yeah. I mean, I have him like right around, probably if I was doing starting pitchers or doing a ranking, I would think I'd probably have him right at SP30.
Yeah,
just
right.
By my basic knowledge.
Just like,
Because
holy shit, we're drafting that now in a Dynasty league?
Yeah, because it's like I compare it to like other pitchers. Like Jose Barrios is like number 32 right now. And while I think you know exactly what you're going to get out of Jose Barrios,
Right.
Corbin Burns' ceiling is much higher.
That's what I'm
right
saying.
now.
If I could draft Jose Barrios right now, that's the kind of, I agree. That's an, or
Yep.
like, yeah.
I
So,
agree.
so anyway, that's just incredible. That just goes to show the quality that's in our draft
Yeah.
right now for a Dynasty league.
For
So,
sure.
Two outstanding pitchers on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. Should I get to my guys now?
Sure.
Why don't I just stay with the pitchers? This is going to be the guy that I actually thought could compete with who you're talking about, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know exactly how it's going to be, and to be fair, there's a lot of good starting pitchers that you could pick up. But my guy is actually Zach Plesac. He had a great season last year, an astounding .795 whip. I think whip's always just like such a good indicator of success to me, and I think it takes a lot more skill to have a good whip than it does a good ERA. Just because you have to do it inning in and inning out.
Right.
The biggest thing too about him, I love the division he plays in still. I know he has the White Sox and the Twins, but for every White Sox and Twins, there's a Royals and Tigers.
Yep.
Which I think is why like a lot of the AL Central pitchers get a lot of bonus.
Yes.
That's
a big topic, actually.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I love about him is the track record Indians pitchers have for producing solid pitchers always.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I think,
Dude, why can't they just build a lineup?
I know. I don't know what I don't understand why either. But their pitching is always phenomenal. Shane Bieber was like a moderate prospect, but he wasn't like top 20.
I think he was when he finally came. Oh, no, you're right.
No.
He was probably like
He was like
at
number
least like
40,
top 30 or
50,
40 or something. Yeah.
He was out. I mean, don't get me wrong. He was a decent prospect, but they took him and turned him into the best pitcher. Carlos Carrasco. They took him and turned him into a lead
Came
starter.
back from leukemia and he's still
Yeah.
great.
Corey Kluber. They took him from fucking the International League and they said, come on over and try out the American League. And he's like, okay, I'll just become a Cy Young Award winner. Trevor Bauer. That's where Trevor Bauer got his footing. Before that, CC Sabathia way early. This team's track record of producing starting pitchers to me is uncanny to the point that I'm like, I fully buy into Zach Plesac. I have no reason to doubt it. Mike Clevenger was another pitcher that literally had an okay first season, then came up. It's every pitcher.
Yeah.
It's every single pitcher.
It's a tough decision to make because they both have their like risks and rewards.
I
I wouldn't want to make that decision.
But
I will say the one stat we haven't considered that makes the decision for me, Corbin Burns. So now we're getting into our opinions on our rankings here, I guess, kind of, is that the effect of Zach Plesac being able to pitch against the Royals and the Tigers was monumental for like most of that COVID season. Like I think that you have to factor in some major aggression from his 228 whip. Sorry, 228 ERA 80 whip. Like I don't know, man. That's the only thing that detracts me from wanting to value him higher, and that's why I would go with Burns.
And that's fair. I think Burns faced. I'd have to see what other division he faced because I thought he also faced the AL Central. I thought the Central stayed with the Central, but I actually could be wrong.
Not as much as Plesac did, I don't think.
Sure, and I think that's fine, but I think it's the fact that the Central will still dominate his league, whereas the Cardinals' offense to me has gotten a little bit better. The Cubs have gotten worse for sure. The Reds are actually a sneaky team. Watch out for the Reds. I forget who the last team in that league is. Is it Pittsburgh? No, it might be Pittsburgh. Or the Pittsburgh isn't East Coast, they're Central. It's Pittsburgh.
It's Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh's a shit team, which to me it actually now that more I look at it, I think they're kind of even. There's 2 really good hitting teams and 2 shitty hitting teams.
Yeah.
I don't know. It'll be interesting. The one thing I can give Corbin Burns for sure, Caper 9. The Caper 9 isn't even close.
Right.
You're going to get that way more from Corbin Burns than you're going to get from Plesac. It's just the argument of, I think Plesac will have a better ERA and a better whip. And I actually think if anybody's going to regress, it'll be Corbin Burns on ERA and whip a little bit. But I think his K per 9 is going to stay electric. So it depends on the trade-off of what you want. And I think that's where it comes down to these pitchers is which category do you need more?
Sure.
And I think
I'd be happy with either, though.
They're
close enough that it's like...
I 100% agree.
Again, crazy that there's even options like this.
Yeah. And then going to hitters really quick. I'm going to take probably what's the second best hitter agreed upon in this year's draft. I think you know who I'm going with this. It's Trent Grisham. I mean, literally go to free agents, go to hitters, you'll find him. It's not a secret anymore. I mean, last year hit 251, 10 home runs, 26 RBIs, 42 runs, 10 stolen bases. I think his OBP was around 325, 340ish, somewhere in that range. Which is good. It's not great, but it's good. Man, he is a 5-tool player in the outfield, and I think right now I made arguments that other players were close to him, but he is still the clear number 2 pick to me. Anytime you can get a 5-tool player, you have to strike for it. He's on, like you said, a great offense around Tatis, Machado, Will Myers, even Jake Cronenworth.
Yeah,
popped off
kind of popped.
A little bit.
Yeah, last season.
Well,
who's also available, isn't he?
I think so, but he's not nearly as good as Trent.
No.
But
yeah,
I don't know. I'll let you talk about him. I know you like him a little bit more than I like him, but yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing to me about Trent Grisham is like his ability to hit, like his ratio of fly balls to line drives went way up, and his exit velocity jumped up. So he's like I've seen projections saying that he might hit like 28 home runs next year.
Oh yeah,
which is like great. Like that's exactly like if he can make that next step again in the environment he's in, with being 24 and a half. Like when you add all these factors together, that's why he's, to me, if you're a competing team, the best batter available in this class, other than Torkelson, because Torkelson's not going to play this year pretty much assuredly. So and that's the thing too, is that he has the speed. So he's like a potential 30-30 guy.
Yeah.
He's not going to get there. He's probably more a 25-25 guy. But even still, that's incredible. That's the thing about like if you can get a player that hits for like isn't just either stolen bases or home runs. Obviously, I'd rather have an only home runs guy, but anytime you can tack on free stolen bases to an already valuable player, it's just even more value. So he's up there with like a Rosarena, and I like both of them, but I do like Grisham a bit more.
That actually leads me into an interesting discussion topic. I do not like a Rosarena.
Yeah,
I worry.
But Cody hit 10 home runs in the postseason.
I don't care. So did Cody Ross.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, everybody can have a hot streak in the postseason. To me, a Rosarena has power. I fully get that. He's over-reliant on home runs, in my opinion. I don't think that's sustainable. And I don't think it's going to be reasonable to assume that. I mean, remember when Aristides Aquino came on and hit 8 home runs in, like, the first 12 games?
But it wasn't in the playoffs.
Oh, my God, who cares? Don't get me wrong. It was fun to see. I was like, that guy's a stud watching him in the playoffs. I don't believe in the hype. When I look at what he's ranked right now, where it says 33 home runs, 82 RBIs, 86 runs, I think what I would disagree with if I had to look at him is they say he's going to get 20 stolen bases. I think stolen bases will go down. I don't think he'll get 20.
He's in the 93rd percentile of sprint speed.
I think he's fast, but I just don't. I think he's too much of a home run hitter, honestly, to get 20 stolen bases. That's my opinion. Will he have a 372 OBP? No way. His whiff rate was so high. No way. But I mean, I don't know. That's just my feelings about him. I actually feel I don't know. I think he'll progress a little bit lower than where he's at. I think Mike Yastrzemski is honestly a pretty comparable guy to him, even though I know he's older. And then I mean, if to me the one of the biggest guys, if you fully believe he's gonna break out or his breakout was real, is Teoscar Hernandez. I don't think it is real because the difference between his OBP and his average is very minuscule and not that high, and I think that kind of always points to issues with me because it says you can't really get on base, so you're over reliant on hitting. And his K rate is also like 33%. It's like he's got like a Miguel Sano K rate. And,
doesn't it say something to you that Rosarena is a Tampa Bay Ray prospect though? Doesn't it feel like they always produce prospects? You were just talking about Plesac.
Not elite ones. I mean, besides Wander Franco, who like I guess Evan Longoria a long time ago, who is the last guy that was elite as a prospect on Tampa Bay?
I mean, Glass now, if you count that as like a Tampa Bay prospect, but it technically really wasn't.
He actually, I've seen videos of him. If you actually look at like his like last month before he left, or 2 months, he actually had already started making the change. Also, Glass now was a top prospect, like top prospect. So to me, that's like, okay, that's one thing. But a Rosarena was like a number 50 prospect, number 40 prospect. Like he was there, but he wasn't really that high. And like to me, he kind of got traded not for that much to go to Tampa Bay from St. Louis. Yeah. I don't like the sample size choosing him that high. I'd rather take somebody who was good over the season over than a guy that had a hot playoff. That's my opinion, but we'll see. I mean, hopefully he produces. That'd be cool to get another power hitter.
We're definitely in a situation where people are really grasping at straws, trying to draw like conclusions on the 60 game sample size, and so it is just a different year. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like it probably is in a lot of ways more appropriate to take if possible, to take someone's 60 game season and couple it with their 160 or 150 in the previous year, and look at the sample as a whole rather than just looking at the 60. But the problem is with players like a Rosarena, we can't really do that, and that's so it's tough because you don't want to miss the ship on a player like him if that 60 game sample size was enough.
Yeah, I mean, and it might be. I just don't. There's just a lot when I look at him as a player that I am alarmed by. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what concerns me. AKA mostly, I'm pretty sure his K rate is pretty high. Again, I'm not looking at MLB Savant right now because I'm sharing my screen. But if I could look it up right now, I'd be very interested to look at it. And honestly, it might not even be worth it to looking at it because I think they just show MLB season stats, which he only played like 10 games in the actual season. He did not play. I mean,
the big thing, like just from my knowledge, because I've thought about this a lot and heard, like it's like the most, like everyone's most favorite Rosarena podcast topic. Yep. His big thing was his speed and his exit velocity.
Yep.
So he's gonna steal bases and he's gonna hit the ball hard.
Yep.
Like that, and those are like transferable stats, and he's young, so it's expected to get better. The sprint speed isn't necessarily, but the exit velocity will as he gets stronger. That's all it comes down to.
I mean, he's not that young anymore. He's like 25, 26.
Yeah, 26.
Yeah, I think he's kind of at his peak right now. Or not peak necessarily, but
not yet.
But yeah. I don't think he's going to improve exit velocity that much more.
No, but it's like already super freaking high.
I think it is high.
And he hit 10 home runs in the playoffs and like 8 in the regular season. That's where this is coming from.
Yeah.
So it's not a fluke.
No, right? No. I think he's a valuable player to draft in the first round. By no means do I think he isn't a first-round draft pick. I just think looking at this year, when I hear that he could go in the top 3 or 4, I don't agree with that spot.
Like in our draft?
In our draft specifically.
When I hear from my sources that he could go in the top 4.
No, yeah, when I hear from people like literally saying, where do I have everybody ranked? Or like where, essentially like if you look at where he's ranked based on best available like hitters, for example, he's the second best available free agent hitter.
Yeah.
In theory, just from looking at this, excluding rookies.
Right.
It's reasonable to assume that he could possibly be a top 4 pick, and I think that would be a mistake. But that's my opinion.
I don't think it's terribly inappropriate
to be top 4.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah,
I don't agree with it.
Well, That's why we have a podcast.
Exactly. We like to have fun here.
I have nothing more to say.
No, I got my pitcher and my batter. I'm good. I think. Oh man, I'm just so excited.
Can we just have the draft already?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Would the commissioner get on that?
No, I'm fine with. We should definitely have some spring training first.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. We'd like to have a little bit of spring training, get to see the players. Also, I think it helps with the fact that early season injuries occur, and as a team, you're able to avoid that a lot more with the later draft. Rest in peace, Royce Lewis. Shout out to him. We'll see him next year, maybe.
Yeah, that's sad.
It sucks. I'm so disappointed about that. But,
Dude, Twins cannot develop prospects.
We can't develop the top ones. We can hit on our number 5 guys.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I do think Alex Kirilloff is the truth. I think he's so good.
Witness him.
Dude, I think he's such a pure hitter. Alex has him in fantasy, and I think he's a stud.
Yeah.
I think I cannot speak highly enough. He's got such an advanced approach to the plate that I just personally haven't really seen in a long time. He's so good.
I agree. Yeah, I'd be very happy to own him as a top 7 prospect.
Yeah, I agree. Which is higher than most people rank him, but yeah. I actually think he is there.
Yeah.
His bat control is just so good. He won't get stolen bases, and that's fine. But if he puts up those stats as a left fielder, that's fine. I ideally think he'll move to first base.
Yeah.
He's a left-handed thrower, and I think he's more situated there. I actually think, ironically enough, there is a disparity in first basemen right now as far as good hitters.
Oh, absolutely.
Besides the top 2, you have pretty much Cody Bellinger and Freddie Freeman, and then after that, there's a huge drop-off of just that's so different compared to years past. Remember when getting a first baseman was one of your last picks?
Yeah.
Because you could wait.
Right.
And now it's
like the QB of first baseman. Yeah.
Right. And now it's no, if you want a good first baseman, you have to strike when the iron's hot.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Well, good point.
So, positional scarcity.
COVID.
Yeah, they all died. I mean, rip Freddie Freeman, who actually did have COVID.
Yeah, and then he came back and should have won the MVP. Anyway, you were just now listening to the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Thanks a ton for listening. We'll probably have another one soon.
Yeah, I think we're going to try doing every week or every other week. That is the goal right now.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not for before the season starts, but yes, long term.
Oh, well, fuck me. Oh. Wow, it doesn't want to see me.
We plan on
we're going to have one. We swear.
So thanks for listening, everyone. It was a pleasure to talk to Cody, you, and it was a pleasure to talk to all you as well. So,
all right, see you guys.
Peace.